Welcome back, everybody. Today we're testing the latest ball from Storm, the Next Factor.
If you like what we do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out on Patreon.
All right, for those who don't know, a little under the weather, just recovering from my next hip replacement. So we were able to test this just before, and so we'll just jump into that. On paper, first impressions, we were all excited to see a Factor ball back from Storm. The question is, what happened on the lanes? All right, let's start with some background information on the ball. The Next Factor brings back the R3S Pearl cover. That's been on some fantastic balls, including the Snap Lock, which we loved. It also brings back the Rad type core shape-wise, but the thing that surprised me most was the RG of 256 on a 15 and 259 on the 14-pound test ball. Now, I don't look at these specs before we test, so we just throw in and have an unbiased take. All this really did finally was confirm why we saw what we saw. For Tyler, the Next Factor offered what I'd say a pretty basic shape that you would kind of expect. Long, check. A little snappy, check. But let's talk a little bit more in detail. I mean, essentially the ball felt long, like it's clearly meant for lower volumes, but also a little thin and forward. And when I say thin, it has a quick hook transition. And that typically is in the snap or angular shape, but it looks, I would say, maybe a little worse due to the very high RGs. It just kind of goes a lot longer than we wanted. So it goes extra long and then does that quick transition, which feels like it's not meant to handle much of anything higher than medium or lower volume. It was fairly forward also, so it either drove hard or deflected a decent amount. Tyler was left with what felt like a mid-late ball, but not sure one we'd choose, being such a big asymmetric core with a forward roll at the end of that flip. Now for me, I'll continue a similar theme, but give you the sort of lefty tweener look. I start out with a speed dominant direct look, and I really felt like the Next Factor needed to be extremely direct for that to work. It was just so long and didn't seem to have an opportunity to get into a roll, so if I didn't stuff it, there was a decent amount of deflection. I worked my way to a more rev speed matched release and started moving in a little bit, and there was, I would say, still some deflection. I had a hard time just getting it to start up. I did touch the surface to crack the power edge, which we usually don't have trouble with, but it really didn't seem to change the behavior much. I did happen to pull out the Motiv Crimson Jackal to compare, with another Pearl ASIM and the Motiv Nebula, a ball that fits flush in the mid-late shape. And you can see right away the Crimson Jackal was clearly more dynamic, as its hook phase is a lot longer, so it's a bigger ball overall. And the Nebula seemed like a better matchup to this condition, even while theoretically it could be the same fit in the bag as the Next Factor. So I would say I was a bit confounded, to be honest. I mean, not that it's bad, it just didn't jump out as a must-have immediately in the bag around what else I currently have. Brian is up next, and I'd say he more or less was dealing with the consequences of what the Next Factor is for his game, right? So he plays closest to the friction, but didn't get a massive jump off of it, which is nice. Brian had a very consistent look, pretty direct, and I'd say the Next Factor looked good going down the lanes as it did for us, but something about possibly the longish RG that just seemed to hold it back from driving through the pins consistently at the right time. I mean, I guess it just seemed like the ball needed more friction than what we had. I don't know that this particular house shot played extremely oily, when looking at some of the other balls I threw, for example. But clearly the Next Factor just either needs to break in a lot more or just needs less volume. Okay, so the bottom line, I feel like the Next Factor was going to have some big shoes to fill with the expectations, like what's in a name. I thought it would be similar to recent blackout balls where speed dominant would overwhelm the core and give you a pretty smooth look, while slowing it down would give it a more motion. However, the next factor felt like a mid-late ball, which is a slot I save for the lower end balls when the pattern's well broken down. But there are other balls that fit more squarely in there. And I could possibly see pros using this to control the lane, since they can make the ball shape more without help from the ball itself. We also are on these high friction lane beds, so that could change things. I'm just not sure what else I can add for the typical house bowler, other than you'll have to save this one for when the lanes break down. And I don't think it recalls the angularity of the original Factor balls. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video when we are back on our feet.